She thought her money could buy her way out of anything: the rules, the truth, even justice itself. Her name was Vanessa Burke, the daughter of a real estate mogul who owned half the city's skyline. For years, she lived like gravity didn't apply to her. Parking tickets vanished. Business fines were handled. Every mistake she made was swept under the rug by someone on her father's payroll. Until one day, the rug got yanked out from under her, in a courtroom where her name, her money, and her arrogance didn't matter. It started with something small. A former friend accused Vanessa of taking thousands from their joint business fund, money meant for a community project. Vanessa brushed it off. In her world, accusations were just noise. She smirked. Through interviews, paid her lawyer, and walked into court like it was a formality. But sitting at that bench was not someone easily impressed. It was an experienced female judge. Silver hair, calm eyes, and a kind of authority that didn't need to shout. The kind that saw straight through the smiles of the entitled. And the moment Vanessa opened her mouth, the room shifted. Because no amount of charm, no designer dress, and no lawyer could protect her from the one thing she didn't understand: accountability. By the time she realized it, it was already too late. The woman she thought she could out-talk was about to dismantle her world with a single sentence. Vanessa Burke didn't believe in consequences, not because she was evil or even particularly cruel, but because in her world, consequences were something that happened to other people. Her mornings began with the hum of a penthouse espresso, machine overlooking the city skyline her father's name had practically built. The Burkes were real estate royalty: marble towers, luxury condominiums, and developments that had turned sleepy blocks into billion-dollar assets. Vanessa had inherited not only the family fortune, but also the belief that money could turn wrongs into misunderstandings and mistakes into paperwork. That belief had never been tested, until Eva Morales entered her orbit. Eva wasn't rich. She was a self-made community organizer with a stubborn streak and a plan to help her neighborhood's small businesses survive rising rents. Vanessa, who fancied herself socially conscious when cameras were around, had met Eva at a charity gala. Between champagne flutes and press photographers, Vanessa announced that she'd personally fund a revitalization project in Eva's district, a co-op workspace for young entrepreneurs. The promise made headlines. The donation never came. But worse than the empty promise was the withdrawal. The moment Vanessa quietly took the seed money that Eva had raised through her nonprofit and redirected it into a Burke Development holding account. A paper shuffle, a few digital transfers, a name change. Nothing dramatic. Just a few lines of code that drained dreams dry. When Eva confronted her, Vanessa laughed. "Sweetheart," she said, voice dripping with privilege, "you really should have read the fine print. That's how business works." Weeks later, that same smirk carried Vanessa into a small claims courtroom, where Eva had filed suit, not for millions, but for principal. Vanessa didn't even want to be there. She had lawyers for that. But her father insisted. "You'll go," he told her, "and you'll show them this nonsense is beneath us." So she went, wearing designer heels that clicked too loudly. On the tile, sunglasses perched on her head as though the courtroom lights were paparazzi flashes. Her attorney, Miles Carver, a polished man with a rehearsed smile, whispered, "Don't speak unless spoken to." She smirked. "Trust me, I won't need to." Eva sat at the plaintiff's table across the room, calm, understated, but visibly nervous. She wasn't there for attention. She just wanted what was right. Her evidence was thin: screenshots, receipts, and a paper trail she'd pieced together herself. But she believed that if she told the truth clearly enough, someone would listen. That someone turned out to be Judge Eleanor Briggs, a woman whose silver hair framed a face carved from experience. Decades on the bench had made her patience finite and her intuition razor-sharp. The courtroom quieted as she entered. Vanessa leaned back, unimpressed. "Good morning," Judge Briggs began. "We're here on Morales versus Burke. Claim of misappropriation of funds, amount of $42,800. Vanessa whispered to Miles. "That's what this is about? Barely a car payment." The judge's gaze snapped to her. "Miss Burke, if you intend to speak, make sure it's relevant." The smirk faltered for the first time. Eva began, voice steady but emotional. "Your Honor, I trusted Miss Burke. She promised to invest in our co-op, and when we sent her the funds to begin the lease, she redirected them into a personal business project. I tried contacting her, Vanessa rolled her eyes audibly. Oh, please. Judge Briggs's pen froze midair. Excuse me? Vanessa waved a hand dismissively. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't redirect anything. The money was part of a consulting agreement. Ava frowned. There was no consulting agreement. Vanessa's chin tilted upward. Verbal, you might have forgotten. Briggs raised an eyebrow. So, you claim there was a verbal agreement for her nonprofit to pay you $42,800 in consulting fees? Yes, Vanessa said confidently. That's exactly what I'm saying. The judge leaned forward. And what specifically were you consulting her on? Vanessa hesitated for half a beat, just long enough for the tension to register. Community branding strategies, she replied finally, her voice taking on that corporate crispness of someone bluffing through a presentation they didn't prepare. Ava blinked. That's not true. Objection to that tone. Miles interjected smoothly. Briggs didn't even look at him. Overruled. Continue, Miss Morales. Ava laid out her evidence. Bank transfers labeled co-op lease deposit. Messages thanking Vanessa for her promise to help finalize the deal, and a final email from Vanessa's assistant confirming the funds had been received. When it was Vanessa's turn, she delivered a performance that could have won an award. She smiled, projected confidence, and sprinkled her words with just enough condescension to sound self-assured, but not disrespectful. Your Honor, she said, I've spent years helping young women like Miss Morales. Sometimes they confuse generosity for obligation. I offered guidance, not partnership. I think she's embarrassed about mismanaging her project and looking for someone to blame. It was polished, polite, almost believable. Almost. Judge Briggs's eyes narrowed. Miss Burke, are you suggesting this entire case is fabricated? I'm suggesting, Vanessa said with a practiced laugh, that it's exaggerated. The judge flipped through the pages in front of her. This email from your assistant, confirming receipt of funds, is this your account number listed here? Vanessa's mask slipped for the briefest moment. Yes, but that was temporary. Temporary, Briggs repeated. So the nonprofit's funds were transferred into your business account? Well, yes, but it's all the same entity under Burke Holdings. The judge's tone sharpened. I thought this was a verbal consulting agreement. Why are nonprofit funds going into your business portfolio? Vanessa shifted in her chair. Because that's how we handle administrative intake. A pause. Do you have documentation of that policy? Not exactly. The silence stretched like wire. Every eye in the courtroom fixed on her. For the first time, Vanessa didn't look like she was performing. She looked like she was cornered. Judge Briggs leaned back. Miss Burke, one thing you'll learn in this room. Words without proof are just noise. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Are you calling me a liar? The judge didn't blink. I'm saying your story doesn't match your paper trail. Miles leaned forward, whispering urgently, Let it go. Stop talking. But Vanessa couldn't help herself. This entire thing is ridiculous, she snapped. She's trying to use the system to guilt-trip me because I didn't babysit her little project. Ava's eyes filled with quiet disbelief. Judge Briggs folded her hands. Watch your tone, Miss Burke. The only person using the system right now is you. And not very well. The courtroom went still. By recess, Vanessa was fuming. This woman has it out for me, she hissed to Miles. She's biased. Miles sighed. She's not biased, Vanessa. She's just not impressed. Well, she should be, Vanessa muttered. I'm trying to do something good here. Miles rubbed his temples. Do yourself a favor. Stop trying to sound noble. It's not helping. When they returned to the courtroom, the tone had shifted. Ava presented a timeline of emails and a lease document that had fallen through because of the missing funds. Vanessa countered with jargon. Liquid asset management, fund reallocation, delayed capital release. It sounded important, but it meant nothing. The judge finally held up a hand. Miss Burke, enough. You're burying this court in vocabulary. I want plain answers. Did you use this money for something other than what was promised? Vanessa hesitated. I temporarily used the funds for an overlapping investment that was related to the project. Related how? Well, it was meant to eventually benefit the same community. Eventually, the judge repeated. And when exactly would that be? Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. It's complicated. Judge Briggs's voice lowered. Calm, precise, surgical. No, Miss Burke, it's not complicated. It's dishonest. The defense table froze. That night, the case made local headlines. Heiress faces heat over missing nonprofit funds. Judge calls testimony dishonest. Vanessa's father called her immediately. What the hell were you thinking? I didn't do anything wrong, she snapped. You didn't think? That's worse. Dad, I'll fix it, he sighed. No, Vanessa. You'll learn from it. She didn't understand what that meant yet. But she would. The next morning, Vanessa returned to court with a new strategy. Tears. The practiced remorse, the quiver in her voice, the I only wanted to help. But sincerity can't be faked to someone who's seen real regret before. Judge Briggs watched her quietly, unimpressed. When Ava took the stand again, she didn't raise her voice or dramatize her pain. She simply said, all I wanted was honesty. She didn't have to give me money. She just had to tell the truth. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Briggs folded her hands. Miss Morales, thank you. Then she turned her attention back to Vanessa, and her expression softened. Not with sympathy, but with gravity. Young lady, she said, you've lived your life confusing privilege for power. They're not the same thing. Power is earned. Privilege can vanish in a day, sometimes in one ruling. The words hung in the air like a verdict waiting to drop. And deep down, Vanessa finally felt something new. Fear. That fear wasn't from losing money, it was from losing control. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one writing the script. And the woman across from her, the one with the silver hair and steady eyes, wasn't playing a part. She was holding a mirror, and the reflection staring back at Vanessa Burke wasn't glamorous or powerful. It was hollow. Vanessa Burke had never lost before. Not an argument, not a deal, not even a public spat that couldn't be smoothed over with a check and a smile. But after that first day in court, something cracked in her perfect reflection. For the first time in years, she wasn't winning. And worse, everyone could see it. By morning, her name was all over social media. Local journalists, activists, and even real estate blogs were dissecting every word from the courtroom. The headline, Judge Calls Burke Dishonest, made her stomach twist. She'd built her image around philanthropy and empowerment. Now, every hashtag under her name burned like judgment. She paced her penthouse, designer robe dragging across the marble floor, ranting into her phone. Miles, I want this story gone. Call whoever you have to. Spin it. She misunderstood me. Something. On the other end, her attorney sighed. Vanessa, this isn't PR, this is court. There's a difference. There's no difference. She snapped. You win both with perception. Miles's voice hardened. You're not on a talk show. The judge doesn't care how many followers you have. She cares about facts, and right now, yours don't line up. Vanessa's expression darkened. Then make them line up, Miles rubbed his forehead. He'd represented difficult clients before, but Vanessa was something else. A perfect storm of entitlement and intelligence, too sharp to be naive, too arrogant to be humble. I'll do what I can, he muttered. But stop talking to the press. You're digging your own hole. She hung up without replying. That night, Vanessa's father, Richard Burke, showed up unannounced. He didn't knock, he had his own key. When she heard the door open, she expected sympathy. Instead, she got disappointment. Sit, he ordered. Dad, please. Sit. She did. Richard was a man of power. Old money, old school discipline. His silver cufflinks gleamed as he crossed his arms. Do you even understand what you've done? Vanessa rolled her eyes. It's not that serious, he laughed bitterly. You stole money meant for a community program, and then lied about it in court. You think that's not serious? It was a misunderstanding. Stop calling it that, he snapped. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was arrogance. You thought because you had the power to move money, you had the right to. Vanessa looked away. Everyone does it. You've done worse deals. The words hung between them like a spark near gasoline. Richard's voice dropped. The difference is I never got caught. And I never lied under oath. Vanessa swallowed hard. So that's it? You're just going to throw me under the bus? He stared at her for a long moment. No, but I won't save you either, she blinked. You always save me. He turned toward the window, his reflection cold in the glass. Not this time. You need to learn what happens when money stops protecting you. Vanessa's voice cracked. Dad, you can't just… He cut her off. You wanted independence. You got it. Now prove you can handle it. Then he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, quieter than a gavel, but somehow heavier. In court the next day, Vanessa came in late. Sunglasses, coffee in hand, chin tilted high. The judge's eyes followed her every step. Miss Burke, said Judge Briggs evenly, you were due at 9 a.m. Vanessa smiled thinly. Traffic, Your Honor. Next time, I suggest leaving earlier. My courtroom runs on truth and time, not excuses. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the audience benches. Vanessa's glare silenced them, but she could feel the heat creeping up her neck. The morning was brutal. Ava's legal aid team presented new evidence, a series of bank transfers from Burke Holdings to a luxury design firm, dated just days after Ava's nonprofit deposit. The payment memo read, Lobby Refurbishment Project. Miss Burke, said the judge, can you explain why money from a community co-op fund was used to redecorate your company's office? Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came. Miles jumped in. Your Honor, those funds were temporarily held and intended to be returned. Were they returned? A pause. Miles sighed. No, not yet. Then they weren't temporarily held, Briggs said coldly. They were misused. Vanessa crossed her arms. We were planning to reimburse… The judge leaned forward. When, after the media forgot? After your reputation recovered? You don't reimburse integrity, Miss Burke. You either have it or you don't. Vanessa's jaw tightened. I'm not the villain here. The judge's voice dropped. Then stop acting like one. The courtroom fell silent. During recess, Vanessa stormed into the hallway, heels clacking like thunder. Cameras flashed. Reporters who'd caught wind of the drama were already waiting. Miss Burke, one shouted. Any comment on the judge calling your testimony dishonest? Vanessa stopped. Every instinct told her to walk away, but pride took the wheel. You know what? She said, facing the cameras. I'm being targeted. This is class bias, plain and simple. People love tearing down success. They don't want to see a young woman in business win. Flashbulbs went off. Journalists scribbled. Ava watched from a distance, shaking her head. When Vanessa returned to the courtroom, the judge was waiting. Miss Burke, Briggs said, you've spoken to the press again. I have a right to defend myself. You have a right to remain silent too. It's often the wiser choice. A ripple of laughter rolled through the audience. Briggs didn't smile. This is not a theater, Miss Burke. Every word you say out there reflects on what you say in here. And right now, your words suggest you still don't understand what this proceeding is about. Vanessa shot back. It's about money. No, said the judge firmly. It's about trust. Something you've squandered. By the third hearing, Miles had lost all patience. He warned her again and again, stop speaking, stop improvising. But Vanessa couldn't help herself. Every time Ava spoke, every time the judge looked at her with that calm disapproval, she felt smaller. And to Vanessa Burke, feeling small was worse than losing. She lashed out. She interrupted. She accused Ava of exaggerating, of staging the whole thing for attention. At one point, the judge had to raise her hand. Enough, she said. Miss Burke, every time you open your mouth, you remind this court why we're here, not because you made a mistake, but because you refuse to own it. Vanessa slammed her palms on the table. This is unfair. Briggs's eyes narrowed. Fairness isn't the issue. Accountability is. The gavel came down once, sharp and final. We'll reconvene tomorrow. And, Miss Burke, I strongly suggest you spend the night reflecting on the difference. That night, she didn't sleep. The city glittered outside her window. But the skyline no longer looked like power. It looked like isolation. Every skyscraper her father had built was a monument to control. And for the first time, she saw how high she'd climbed by standing on other people's shoulders. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Texts from friends, gossip blogs, even a message from her father's PR team advising damage containment. But she couldn't bring herself to reply. She walked to her mirror, staring at her reflection. Perfect makeup, perfect posture, but behind the eyes, something fragile, something scared. For the first time, Vanessa didn't see herself as a success story. She saw herself as a case file. The next morning, Ava entered the courtroom early. She wasn't smug, but she was resolute. She'd spent months fighting for this, not for revenge, but for truth. When Vanessa finally walked in, late again, the entire courtroom felt the weight of her fatigue. Her confidence had cracks now, subtle but visible. Judge Briggs began, voice steady. Miss Burke, before we continue, I'd like to remind you that this court is not your stage. It's your reflection, and right now it's showing you exactly who you are. Vanessa swallowed hard. Then maybe it's wrong, she muttered. The judge didn't miss a beat. Mirrors don't lie, Miss Burke. People do. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a reckoning. The third day of trial began not with fanfare, but with fatigue. The courtroom that had once buzzed with media interest now felt quieter, denser. Every eye was on Vanessa Burke, and even she could feel it. The whispers had changed tone. The curiosity had turned to pity. Her arrogance, once a shield, was cracking under the relentless rhythm of truth. Ava Morales sat poised, hands folded neatly, her evidence binder marked and worn from use. This wasn't a war of wealth anymore, it was a war of credibility. And for the first time, Vanessa was fighting on terrain money couldn't buy. Judge Eleanor Briggs entered, the black robe flowing like authority itself. Her silver hair caught the overhead lights as she took her seat. There was no need for a gavel. Her presence alone silenced the room. Court is now in session, she said, voice low but steady. We'll begin with closing arguments. Miles Carver rose first, glancing nervously toward Vanessa. His suit was impeccable, but his confidence had waned. Your Honor, he began, my client has been portrayed as reckless, dishonest, even malicious. But let's not forget the facts. This was not theft. It was a business misunderstanding, an administrative delay at worst. Judge Briggs leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. Mr. Carver, your client has admitted under oath that she diverted nonprofit funds into her personal business account. How is that administrative? He shifted uncomfortably. Because the funds were always intended to be repurposed for the community. For a lobby refurbishment? The judge's tone was sharp but restrained. He exhaled. Yes, eventually. Eventually, Briggs repeated, the word heavy with implication. Mr. Carver, justice doesn't operate on eventually. It operates on evidence. And your client's evidence is thin. Vanessa's eyes darted to her lawyer. For once, he had no spin left. Then it was Ava's turn. She stood calm and resolute, her voice steady despite the tremor of nerves. Your Honor, she began, I didn't file this case to humiliate anyone. I filed it because what happened was wrong. I built my nonprofit on trust that people with power would want to do good. And when that trust was broken, it didn't just cost me money. It cost our community hope. Her words echoed softly against the marble walls. I don't have the resources Miss Burke has. I don't have her lawyers or her influence. But I have the truth. And I believe in this court enough to think that's still worth something. Then she sat down, quiet as gravity. The judge said nothing for several moments. The silence was louder than any outburst. Miss Burke, Briggs finally said, before I issue my ruling, you may speak. Vanessa hesitated. Her usual smirk was gone. For the first time, she looked unsure. Your Honor, she began carefully, I made mistakes. I admit that. But I didn't mean any harm. I really thought I was helping. Maybe I was naive, or maybe I trusted the wrong people in my company to manage it properly. Briggs interjected, Miss Burke, you were the company? Vanessa froze. Yes, but no but, Briggs said. You were the sole signatory on every transfer. The tension tightened. Vanessa's voice rose slightly, defensive now. You're making me sound like some criminal. I was trying to run a business. The judge's eyes hardened. No, Miss Burke, you were running from responsibility. And that's worse. The words cut through her composure. Her lips trembled. Not from emotion, but from sheer disbelief that anyone would speak to her like that. You think because you've always been able to buy your way through life, that truth has a price tag. It doesn't, the judge continued. And today, you're going to learn that. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. Judge Briggs stood, file in hand. Her voice carried the calm precision of finality. Miss Morales, this court finds your claims substantiated. The defendant, Miss Burke, is ordered to repay the full amount of $42,800. plus punitive damages of $10,000 for misuse of charitable funds. Furthermore, given the intentional misrepresentation, the judgment will be reported to the relevant oversight bodies for further review. Vanessa's jaw dropped. You can't. The gavel struck once. I can, and I have. A hush fell. Ava's eyes widened in disbelief, then relief. She exhaled deeply, tears glinting but never falling. Vanessa, meanwhile, sat frozen, her face pale. It wasn't about the money. It was the word, guilty of misuse of funds. That phrase would follow her everywhere. In articles, in whispers, in the mirror. After a long silence, Judge Briggs spoke again, this time softer, but with a weight that lingered. Miss Burke, you weren't born dishonest. You learned it from a world that rewards deceit and mistakes arrogance for success. But here's the thing about courtrooms. They strip away everything you can hide behind. The money, the influence, the entourage. All that's left is character. Vanessa's throat tightened. And right now, the judge continued, yours is the only thing you can't buy back. Vanessa didn't respond. She couldn't. Ava turned slightly toward her, their eyes meeting briefly. There was no triumph there, only clarity. Two women from opposite worlds, bound by a single truth. One had taken, and the other had stood her ground. After court adjourned, the hallway filled with murmurs. Cameras flashed. Vanessa shielded her face as reporters shouted questions. Miles tried to intervene, but she pushed past him, heels striking the tile like desperate punctuation marks. Miss Burke, will you appeal? Did you lie on the stand? Is your company under investigation? She didn't answer. She couldn't hear them over the noise of her own thoughts, the sound of her carefully constructed image shattering in real time. Outside, she ripped off her sunglasses, blinking against the daylight. The wind hit her face like truth itself, cold, unfiltered, unmerciful. Ava stepped outside moments later. A few reporters tried to swarm her too, but she raised a hand politely. No comment, she said softly. Justice spoke for itself. Then she walked down the courthouse steps, shoulders lighter than they had been in months. Not because she'd won, but because she'd been heard. Inside the nearly empty courtroom, Judge Briggs sat alone for a moment longer. Her clerk approached cautiously. Tough one? Briggs sighed. No tougher than most. But every now and then, I see a glimpse of what's wrong with the world and what's right with it. The clerk smiled. You think she'll change? The judge shook her head. I think she'll remember. Sometimes that's enough. Later that night, Vanessa sat in her car outside her father's estate, headlights casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Her phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls. Press, colleagues, friends suddenly turning into strangers. She ignored them all. For the first time, she didn't want noise. She wanted quiet. She opened her laptop, staring at the homepage of her company's website. The bold tagline glared back, "Building tomorrow, today." She laughed bitterly. Tomorrow, she muttered. What a joke. Then with one decisive click, she logged in to make the repayment transfer. The numbers on the screen blurred for a second as her eyes welled, not from guilt, but from clarity. Money had always been her language. Now it was her sentence. At the same moment, across town, Ava sat on her apartment balcony. The city lights blinked beneath her, messy, imperfect, alive. Her phone buzzed too, calls from the nonprofit team, supporters congratulating her. But she stayed quiet, letting the cool night wind brush against her face. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. When the truth walks slowly, let it. It always arrives. And tonight it had. The next morning, a newspaper headline told the world what the courtroom already knew. Wealthy developer's daughter loses case. Judge says character can't be bought. But beneath that story, in smaller text, was another headline, Community Co-op back on track after legal victory. That was the one Ava cut out and pinned above her desk. Somewhere else in the city, Vanessa watched that same story scroll across her phone screen. For once, she didn't call her lawyer. She didn't call her father. She just sat there, reading the judge's quote again and again. The money, the influence, the entourage. All that's left is character. She didn't cry. But she didn't scoff either. For the first time, Vanessa Burke understood what it meant to be seen. Not through luxury or legacy, but through failure. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something real. That afternoon, she received a certified envelope from the courthouse. Inside was the official judgment order, embossed with the seal of the court. But tucked between the papers was a single handwritten note from Judge Briggs. "Integrity is not a currency, Miss Burke. It's a choice. Spend it wisely next time." Vanessa read it twice. Then she placed it on her desk beside the checkbook. For once, she didn't feel angry. She felt accountable. And that, though she didn't realize it yet, was the first honest thing she'd felt in a very long time. The city was colder that week. Or maybe Vanessa just noticed it for the first time. For days after the judgment, her world shrank to silence. No assistants, no publicists, no board meetings. Just the hum of her phone, vibrating with unanswered calls. The lavish penthouse that once felt like a throne now felt like a glass cage, each echo of her footsteps reminding her that luxury couldn't fill loneliness. She'd replayed the trial in her mind over and over, the judge's words, Ava's voice, even the gasps from the audience when the verdict dropped. Each memory scraped at her pride like sandpaper. And though she told herself she didn't care, she hadn't slept properly since that morning. She opened her inbox and saw the official court receipt. Funds received, case Morales vs. Burke, paid in full. It was over. But it didn't feel over. She stared at the line that said balance, 0.0, then shut the laptop. The number meant nothing. For the first time in her life, money hadn't fixed the mess. It had only ended it. Across town, Ava Morales woke up to a different sound. Laughter. The community co-op she'd fought to save was open again. The lease was signed, the renovations had begun, and volunteers buzzed with excitement. The air smelled like coffee and paint, and for the first time in months, Ava allowed herself to breathe. She walked through the old building, cracked walls, flickering lights, but full of promise. A group of teens were setting up donated laptops, giggling as they tested the Wi-Fi. "You really did it," one of them said. "You beat her," Ava smiled faintly. "No," she said. "We won because we didn't quit." Still, when she passed a newsstand later that afternoon, she paused. The latest magazine cover showed Vanessa Burke, not in a glamorous pose but mid-step, eyes downcast. Headline blazing, "From heiress to headline, when money meets consequences." Ava stared for a long moment, then quietly turned the magazine face down. Vanessa's fall wasn't dramatic, it was gradual. Investors backed away. Her father's company put her on leave. Invitations stopped arriving. Even her closest friends, the kind who clung to her during champagne parties and photo ops, suddenly found other commitments. Her publicist begged her to make an apology video, to humanize herself. But every draft felt false. She'd lost the ability to lie convincingly, and that, she realized, might be the one good thing to come out of this. For days, she wandered through the city she used to own, unnoticed, unimportant, anonymous. She sat in cafes where no one cared who she was, overhearing conversations about rent, traffic, dreams, and disappointments. She started to see what Ava had meant when she said, "It's not about money, it's about trust." One evening, Vanessa found herself parked outside the courthouse. She hadn't planned it. Her car just seemed to drive there on its own. The building was dark now, quiet, empty. But standing there, she could almost hear the echo of Judge Briggs's voice. She walked up the steps and stood before the doors, her reflection faint in the glass. "Character isn't bought," the judge had said. "It's earned," Vanessa whispered to the wind. "Then maybe it's time I start earning it." And that was the night she did something no one expected. She called Ava. When Ava saw the number, she almost didn't answer. Her stomach tightened, old resentment flickering like static. But curiosity won. "Hello?" A pause. Then Vanessa's voice, quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to talk." Ava hesitated. "Why now?" "Because I've run out of excuses," Vanessa said. "And because you were right." Ava's silence was steady. Not forgiving, but not cold either. Vanessa continued, "I paid the judgment. But I know that doesn't fix the damage, so if you'll let me, I want to help make it right." Ava's voice softened slightly. "You think you can just walk in and fix what you broke?" "No," Vanessa said honestly. "But I can start by showing up." A week later, she did. When she arrived at the co-op building, volunteers turned to stare. A few whispered. But Ava simply crossed her arms and said, "You really came." Vanessa nodded. "You said this was about community. I want to understand what that actually means." The tension was thick. But Ava saw something different in Vanessa's eyes now. Not entitlement, not performance. Just humility. She handed her a paint roller. You can start with the walls. Vanessa blinked. You're serious? Ava smirked. Characters earned, remember? For the first time in months, Vanessa smiled, genuinely. Days turned into weeks. Vanessa kept showing up, painting, cleaning, listening. At first, people were skeptical. Some avoided her. Others were openly hostile. But she didn't fight it. She didn't explain herself. She just worked. The woman who once ordered assistants to fetch her coffee now fetched coffee for volunteers. The woman who once manipulated funds now learned how to manage a donation spreadsheet, transparently, humbly, meticulously. Little by little, the wall of resentment began to crack. One afternoon, Ava found Vanessa sitting on the steps outside the building, covered in paint, staring at the skyline. You look like someone who actually earned her blisters, Ava teased. Vanessa chuckled. I used to think work was something you delegated. And now I think it's something you understand or you don't deserve what comes from it. Ava nodded approvingly. You're learning. Vanessa looked down. Do you think people can really change? Ava paused. Only if they stop pretending they already have. That answer lingered with her long after sunset. Months later, when the co-op officially reopened, the media showed up again, not for scandal this time, but for celebration. Ava stood at the podium, flanked by volunteers, while Vanessa stayed in the crowd, unannounced, unnoticed. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to see it, something real that existed because she finally chose honesty over ego. When Ava thanked those who stood by us and those who chose to learn from their mistakes, her eyes briefly found Vanessa's in the crowd. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough. Back at home, Vanessa finally opened the note the judge had sent weeks ago, the one she'd tucked away in a drawer. Integrity is not a currency. It's a habit. She placed it in a frame on her desk. Then slowly, she began to draft a letter. Not for PR, not for redemption, but for truth. It began simply, to anyone I've ever hurt while chasing success, I'm sorry. I thought money was proof that I mattered. I was wrong. What matters is who you are when you can't buy your way out. She didn't send it to the press. She posted it on the co-op's community bulletin board instead, right beside a flyer for Small Business Saturday. And for the first time, people didn't see Vanessa Burke, the heiress. They saw Vanessa, the woman who finally learned how to stand on her own merit. Later that week, she ran into Judge Briggs by coincidence at a charity event. The judge looked surprised but calm. Miss Burke, she said, I hear you've been busy. Vanessa smiled faintly. Trying to earn a little character. Briggs nodded, eyes softening. Good. That's the only kind of wealth that lasts. Then she added quietly, don't waste the lesson. I won't, Vanessa said. And for once, she meant it. That night, as Vanessa walked home through the city, she passed a mural that volunteers from the co-op had painted. A scale of justice balanced perfectly, with a single word underneath, honor. She stopped to look at it, hands in her pockets, wind catching her hair. The world hadn't forgiven her. But she didn't need it to, because forgiveness wasn't the point. Becoming worthy of it was. And as the city lights glowed against the dark, Vanessa Burke, the woman who thought her money could save her, finally understood that saving yourself had nothing to do with wealth. It had everything to do with truth.